Welcome to Donnie a Daytona Part 3, which isn't really Part 3. I mean, it sorta is. I called it Part 3, but it's not really. See, I called it Part 3 because when I started working on Parts 1 and 2, I thought I was making a much shorter video, and I was gonna pad it out with this claim that I thought was just unbelievably dumb. And if you've seen Parts 1 and 2, you know how that went. Those ended up being like an hour and a half combined almost. And then I followed that up with a 2-part response to his response to Part 1, and this part's not even about the same video as the first 2 parts were, so it's really a whole new response, and calling it Part 3 makes absolutely no sense, but I'm doing it anyway. Yeah, it's dumb. Don't worry about it. Moving on.
It can't be 250,000 miles away.
Wow, look at that firmament go. That moon's jiggling like a bowl of jello.
Watch how many unidentified objects that resemble birds fly across the surface of this entire moon clip.
Oh yeah, okay. I think I can identify those unidentified bird-like objects. They're they're birds. I mean, yeah, I could be wrong, but just throwing crazy ideas out there.
Dragon shapeshifters, maybe.
Well, I suppose that's technically another option.
There was one.
Yep.
Did you see that one?
No, Whoa! Holy crap, yeah! That's a real humdinger of a bird. Good eye, Donald.
Rockets launched from here.
Okay, I don't know what that is. I mean, it's out of focus to the point that to say for sure I'd have to be some sort of, forensic telescopologist. Yeah, that seems like a word. But I'm not here for that. I'm here for the dragon shapeshifters. So I'll leave the rockets alone. I have quite a lot to say about those dragons, so I want to stick to that.
Things fly across the moon all the time.
Yeah, that'll tend to happen when you're in an atmosphere full of flying things.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. I actually got a pretty good look at it that time, and it looks very, very birdy. I gotta say I'm not quite seeing the argument for dragon shapeshifters just yet.
This so-called dead object is teeming with life if you film it enough.
Oh, so they're not just dragon shapeshifters, they're moon-dwelling dragon shapeshifters. I feel like you're running ahead of me a little bit here. We haven't even established the dragon shapeshifter part, and now you're onto them living on the moon. Well, alright, Donnie, if that's what you want to do, how can we establish that these not birds actually live on the moon? And a few other questions for you. If they're dragons and they're flying across the surface of the moon that they live on, why are they flying tipped on one side relative to the surface of the moon? And for that matter, how?
Don't go nowhere. We're not done yet.
Oh, I hadn't planned on going nowhere. In fact, now I'm on the edge of my seat waiting for the moment that's definitely going to be in this video where you bring up some kind of argument to justify all of this and put all my concerns to rest.
These objects that look like birds are definitely on the surface, so there is no way it could be 250,000 miles away.
Okay, that's the what, but why? The moon could be really big and really far away, and they could just be really big objects that look like birds. I mean, we're already talking about dragon shapeshifters that fly on their sides. I don't see why them being big would stretch your imagination. Maybe they're big giant dragon-shaped airliners the reptoids use to fly around between their moon cities. Who's to say? Sounds reasonable to me. But okay, if for some reason it really does have to mean the moon is close, meaning the moon is really quite tiny, then I want to know more about the lifestyle of these moon dragon shapeshifters. I mean, they seem to fly straight across the moon without stopping every time, and then they fly straight off the side. That's an odd thing to do if you live on that moon, don't you think? Do you have any videos of these dragons landing on the moon? Do they have some sort of nesting behavior? Do they crawl into craters and live under the surface like giant moles? What do they eat if the moon's so small and apparently so desolate? Is there some kind of journey to the center of the earth style underground wonderland? And hold up, wait a minute, if the moon's so tiny, then the people who live in the buildings on it, who we talked about in the last video, are they teeny tiny little people? Little itty-bitty finger-sized moon gnomes cowering in their underground hovels in constant terror of the comparatively enormous moon dragons? Oh, Donnie, I have so many questions, none of which will likely ever be answered because that's it for the moon dragons part of the video. Now you go on typing about how Sirius is a Stargate because it looks weird when it's out of focus, showing yet again that you don't actually know what out of focus means, and putting the lie once again to your excuse in your response to me that you do know the objects you film just look the way they do because they're hideously out of focus, and you're really actually just trying to film the watery firmament in front of them and not trying to see what the objects actually look like. Yes, you are trying to see something about what they actually look like by taking them out of focus. You just confirmed it again, you liar. Alright, so is everyone as confused as I am about that video? Good, I'm glad it's not just me. I think the biggest outstanding question here is why does Donnie think this video shows that the birds are definitely on the surface of the moon? Well, if all we had to go on was this video itself, we'd be completely out of luck, but luckily he's active in the comments. John Daly says, I'm pretty sure those black objects are bats. I live next to an old church with the eaves full of them. They look exactly like that. Yeah, that's true, John. They could be bats too. Who knows? I'll just keep on calling them birds because I don't feel like saying or a bunch, but yeah. Donnie replies,
The point is, if they weren't close to the surface, they would not be in focus, and they would show up bigger than the moon.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Birds flying across the moon don't look bigger than the moon unless they're pretty close to you. If distant birds flying across the moon don't look bigger than the moon to your naked eye, why are they suddenly going to look bigger than it through a telescope? That statement is so dumb I can't even... Okay, he's not done. Maybe he explains it. I shouldn't judge before I read it all.
I filmed planes going by the telescope before, and they totally blocked the moon out because of distance.
Well, not just distance, size and distance, i.e. angular size.
Now, these things are focused along with everything on the moon, and they're the size that they should be because the moon is only 100 miles above your head.
They're the size that they should be. They look the size that they should be if they're a distant bird flying across the moon, Donnie. How big do you expect a bird like 10 kilometers away to look? Wait, what is the principle you're trying to explain here? Like, are close things supposed to dramatically increase in angular size and distant things dramatically decrease in angular size through a telescope? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Because that's not remotely true. Okay, I have to say I did not expect to be saying this to a grown-ass man today, but here goes. Birdie small, moon big. Bird closer, still looks smaller. Do I need to whip out the math or something to demonstrate this point? I mean, I'd like to think no, but maybe? But you know, I don't think I'm gonna bother right now because if someone hasn't figured this out on their own, are they really gonna understand the kind of math that's necessary to explain it? Yeah, there's really no point, is there? Donnie goes on.
Haven't you ever heard of demonic entities shape-shifting to look like things you recognize?
No. I mean, in fantasy movies, yeah, but in reality, no. Alright, Donnie, how about this? This isn't some transcendental god claim, right? This is something that you should be able to visually demonstrate to me. So how about you show me one? By which I mean not a shot of what looks exactly like a bird crossing the moon that you just assert is one, but one I can actually verify. You get to work on that, and until then, I'm just gonna side with Occam over here on this question and take the far, far simpler explanation of bird. You know what, you don't even have to necessarily show me one, okay? Find some way to convince me of the existence of dragon shapeshifters on the moon based on some kind of solid evidence that leaves little room for alternative possibilities. And then I'll reconsider, okay? Thanks, dude. Good luck. And he still goes on.
It still does not take away from the fact that they're in focus, flying through the moon's atmosphere.
Yet another claim that hasn't been demonstrated. I'm pretty sure what you mean by the moon's atmosphere is just the visible movement of the Earth's atmosphere. You know, the big giant ocean of air that we know exists, know the effects of, and know we're standing on the bottom of.
How could both be in focus at the same time unless they're on top of each other?
What, unless they're directly on top of each other, like in contact? Depth of field? I'll get to that in a second, okay?
That's how telescopes work. You create a focal point, everything else will be blurry.
Uh-huh. Okay, I think, yeah, it is. It's an actual argument, kinda. Wow, this is great! Alright, Donnie, I think I finally see the source of your confusion here. See, the way you're talking about focus, I think you think it works something like this. Is that about right? Like, everything on the focal plane is in focus, but everything closer or further from you is out of focus, right? But as you already know, if you've ever experimented with your equipment, or watched a movie, or seen a photograph, or looked at your own drone footage once in your life, that's not how it works. What you're missing is that it actually works more like this. There's a range of distances that's acceptably well focused, and outside of that range, objects get progressively more out of focus as they get further away from that focused area. And that focused range is called your depth of field. This depth of field varies by your focal length, your aperture size, the exact definition of acceptable focus, and the distance to the subject you're focusing on. That last one might sound a little bit confusing, but the point is, as you focus further and further away, you get a larger and larger depth of field. And eventually, it gets so large that everything from a certain distance away to infinity is at acceptable focus. Depth of field is why you can, for example, take a picture showing both an object in the near foreground and a distant part of the landscape, both in focus. We've seen your brilliant leaf example before, where some leaves at one distance were in focus and some leaves further away weren't. Well, you could have changed that. Maybe not as easily with your spotting scope, considering its fixed aperture, but if you took one of your normal photo cameras, it would have been a breeze. Just switch your f-stop and you have more or less stuff in focus. Anyway, that's enough about depth of field for now, unless I have to get into some more specific details later. You can research this yourself, Donnie, very easily. Just type depth of field into Google or YouTube or something and start reading or start watching or whatever. And you probably should. I mean, once again, you don't quite seem to understand the technology you're working with, but for some reason you still base your entire understanding of the world on your assumption that you do. You know so little that you don't even know what you don't know and you think you know it all. I guess you could call it the Donnie Kruger effect. In your reply to Krellboyne Kip, we find more detail about your ideas that planes apparently have to look giant compared to the moon.
You're exactly right. I picked up planes before at 30,000 feet, but because of line of sight and distance factor, the plane appeared to be 10 times larger than the moon, because the plane was closer.
I see. Did you ever consider that if the plane looked that big compared to the moon, maybe it wasn't actually flying at 30,000 feet? Do you know it was? How do you know it was? Did you measure its altitude somehow? If so, how? And more importantly, how exactly do you explain a plane flying at 30,000 feet having an angular size of 300 arc minutes, despite the fact that even a 250-foot long 747-8 jet, the longest passenger airliner in the world, flying at 30,000 feet directly overhead would have an angular size from nose to tail of about 29 arc minutes. Roughly the same angular size as the moon, if not a little bit smaller. What is your claim? That you've discovered a plane that violates basic mathematics? I'm gonna need a little more than just your word to believe that.
But here you see these entities that don't appear to be super large because they're the same distance as the moon. They're flying close to the surface. This proves it, otherwise they'd be huge.
Seriously, how do you think telescopes work, dude? Teach me how a telescope makes it so that an object that's closer than another object must have a larger angular size than the further away object, regardless of its size. Teach me, please.
It would fly by the camera and show a huge shadow flying by, but that's not what's happening.
Yeah, because it's not flying right in front of your face. It's a bird flying far away that you're looking at with a telescope, Donnie. And when it's far away, its angular size is smaller than if it's really close to you, just like the moon. That doesn't change just because you look through a telescope instead of your bare eyes. If it worked the way you said, then every time you tried to take a look at the landscape with your telescope, you'd see nothing but giant birds and bugs flying around blocking your view of the mountains just because they're closer, and therefore must look bigger than the mountains for some reason, regardless of how far away they are. How can I explain this in a way that'll actually get through to someone who's even capable of being confused about this? Actually, why am I even explaining it at all? Let's just move on. So apparently this Moondragon shapeshifter video prompted a few questions, so let's see Donnie's follow-up to those questions, where he schools all those haters in photography.
Let's take a lesson in photography.
Oh, please let's.
This is called a focal point of a tree 500 meters from the photographer's location.
Ah, going third person with it. Classy.
As you can see, some things are clear and some things further away or closer are blurry.
That's right. Good observation. Now pop quiz, Donnie. If you narrowed your aperture while you were focused on those leaves, what would happen? Or another question, what if you didn't change your aperture and you still focused on those leaves, but instead of being 500 meters away, they were 5,000 meters away? How do you think that's going to affect the appearance of those leaves in the background? I'm not going to answer that for you, although I suppose you can guess my answer pretty easily.
Obviously, the things closer seem much huger than the actual things that are clear.
Yes, things that are out of focus will look bigger. Exactly how much bigger depends how out of focus they are. This is what I was trying to tell you with your planets. You know, before you tried to get my attempts to help you flagged as hate speech.
That is called a focal point.
This is called depth of field, and it's not a single point.
Here you can see UFOs flying across the surface of the moon. As you can see, both items are in focus because they share the same focal point.
Are you sure they're in focus? Those birds are looking a little blurry in this one, Donnie. Either way, in the first video we looked at, they look pretty well in focus. And in that case, the reason is that you're shooting with a depth of field that has both the moon and the birds at acceptable focus. And yes, that is possible. Here, let me show you. In a previous video, we already saw the comment you left on your bird moon video about which telescope you're using. Celestron Astromaster Telescope with Orion Digital Eyepiece Camera. Which is odd, because this is is actually after you said you'd started using your spotting scope for moon observation, but whatever. So since you're using an eyepiece camera, your telescope's basically just operating like a big ol' camera lens, so we're going to use this calculator. Your Celestron Power Seeker has a 1000mm focal length, focal ratio 7.87, which will round to 8, and your eyepiece camera has a 1/2.5-inch sensor. Now, we don't have that option on this site, so we'll just calculate for a 1/2-inch sensor and a 1/3-inch sensor and split the difference for a close enough kind of answer. As for your subject distance, well, your subject is the moon, and the moon is about 384,000 kilometers away, so we'll put 384 million meters. I'll note down these two numbers. This is the result for the 1/2-inch sensor, and now I'll switch to a 1/3-inch sensor and note the same numbers down again, and now I'll split the difference to get my good enough answer. And here we go. So you can see that if you focus on an object 384 million meters away with your telescope and camera combination, everything from a little bit less than 10 kilometers away all the way to infinity would be at acceptable focus. And if instead you chose to focus on the hyperfocal distance, the distance at which everything from half of the subject distance to infinity is in focus, your depth of field is even deeper, from less than 5 kilometers all the way to infinity, which is probably not what you were expecting if you thought you were focusing on one single point and everything closer or further from that should be out of focus. I'm sorry, Donnie, but that's just not how focus works. What you need to do is watch some educational videos on photography, maybe play with your stuff a little bit, and try to learn so you can stop thinking random birds or moon-dwelling dragon shapeshifters just because you don't know how your stuff works. But alright, you're probably wondering if a bird several kilometers away where it would be in focus will actually look that big through your telescope, right? Well, let's figure it out. I really need a light pole moment in this video anyway. So first off, I just want to figure out exactly what I'm looking at here, so I want to know when exactly you took this image so I can get a full image of the moon to compare it to. In your reply to Jessica, Colorado, you say you filmed it at 10 p.m. Eastern Time the day before you uploaded the video, so February 19th. Here's a picture of how the moon would have looked at that time, 3 a.m. February 20th UTC. I fit your image onto this one the best I could. It's not quite perfect because of the atmospheric distortion, but it's okay. So according to CalSky, the moon's angular size on February 19th was 33 minutes 26 seconds or 2006 arc seconds. And in the image, the bird is roughly 20 pixels across, whereas the moon is about 2243 pixels across. That makes the bird 0.89% of the angular size of the moon. And as I said, the moon's angular size is 2006 arc seconds, so multiply that by 0.0089, and we get about 18, the bird's angular size in arc seconds. So let's take a guess at the size of our bird and then figure out how far away it would be. We'll think of this in terms of a diameter. I'm sort of idealizing it as a circle with the diameter roughly representing the head to tail length or the length of a single wing. I've tried this with various sizes of birds, and I found that birds with a 1.5 foot diameter, that is the size of a medium to large seagull, work just fine if we say you're focused at the hyperfocal distance with its near limit of about 4,800 meters or almost 16,000 feet. So that already proves that this can be a bird, and a fairly small one at that. But with our other near limit, considering the moon is the subject, it's too close to fall within your depth of field. I want to see if there's a bird in Florida that can be further away than both of our near limits, because, I don't know, I like to be extra thorough even when I don't need to be. So what kinds of larger birds does Florida have? Well, cranes and herons are common. There are pelicans, maybe geese. Plenty of birds that could have a wingspan of a good 6 feet or so, or 3 feet if you see them from the side in flight with the wings stretched upward. So let's solve for distance based on a 3-foot real width and an 18 arcsecond angular size. And that distance is 34,377 feet, or 10,478 meters. Well, no matter which of our two near limits you take, that's well within your depth of field. So that big old bird's easily in focus. And I don't know about you, Donnie, but I find it a little bit more plausible that there are biggish birds in Florida than that there are sideways flying dragon shapeshifters on the moon. Just saying.
They share the same focal point, which puts the items on the moon, not closer to the cameraman or further away, which that couldn't happen because the moon is the background.
Well, Donnie, I can see how you might leap to that conclusion if you have not the faintest clue what you're doing and don't care about questioning claims that sound worth a double check, to put it charitably. Alright, well, that's as good a place as any to stop. I just wanted to cover that one claim real quick because I just, still can't quite believe that someone is actually confused by birds flying across the moon. Maybe I'm the only one who's so amazed by this claim, I don't know. You'd think I'd get used to this kind of stuff over time, but nope. Anyway, like and subscribe and all that, and if you want to see more stuff like this, consider supporting the channel on Patreon or Subscribestar like all these great people on the screen, or if you want a different option, you can go to support.logicked.com. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time for, actually, I don't know, but something that's not Donnie of Daytona.